The Force will be with you, always.
Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Well, hello and welcome to Aggressive Negotiations. So excited to be coming at you from Tython today. It is a little sparse here. The Jedi ruins are not as ruinous as I thought they would be, in the sense that there's barely anything here. And John, when you get off that rock, how many times have I told you not to play on the Seeing Stone?
Listen, you call it a seeing stone. I call it a playground equipment, okay? I see a lot of possibility right here. You build a little jungle gym over this thing. We're going to have a lot of fun swinging around. Don't crush my dreams, okay? Now, excuse me while I go into a trance-like state and try to communicate across the stars with some Jedi city planner so that we can make Tython great again, okay?
All I can picture is Grogu singing, "Somewhere out there."
Yeah. You know what? I would love to have like a little short bit with like Luke sitting on whatever the name, whatever planet it is, sitting there. Like imagine like him like walking and like he suddenly gets distracted. Like that'd be a cool little like short comic to do, is like have the moment where Luke feels Grogu's call.
Yeah,
that'd be kind of cool.
That'd be great, man. Well, of course, we're going to dive into the next episode here of The Mandalorian. It is chapter 15, and it's chapter 14, and it's called The Tragedy. And it is pretty tragic. But before we get there, you can find us all over social media. We're on X, Twitter, at The Jedi Masters. We're, of course, on Instagram with the entire network, at The Nerd Party. You can find us online at thenerdparty.com. See all the shows that are happening. Plus, we're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. And if you like the show, just, help your friends find it. Give us a star rating and review over Apple Podcasts. Maybe share the show with, other Star Wars fans. Maybe you know a Star Wars fan in your life and you're like, I've got the podcast for you. It's called Aggressive Negotiations. But John, so this episode is one of those where, we just got the Jedi. Ahsoka tells Din where she needs to bring Grogu, and we don't have anything in between. We actually just head straight to Tython. And I would say that one of the hallmarks of this episode is that it's the first one directed by Rodriguez. And this episode itself is kind of short in some ways on story in a lot of ways, because it just feels like once the action starts, it's just one massive extended action sequence.
Which plays into the strengths of Robert Rodriguez as a director. He does action very, very well. And so I think you're maximizing your director's skill set here, which is not a backhanded compliment. I'm not damning with faint praise. I'm saying like Rodriguez does some really interesting things with frame rate. I think sometimes with these Star Wars shows that they've had, they try to cheat it a little bit by speeding up film. Whereas his use of frame rate distracts from those sorts of camera tricks. It makes it much more stylized, the way that Guy Ritchie will do it with slow motion,
right,
and impact shots and stuff like that. So I think it's a very fresh type of visual language to bring into Star Wars. So I'm a big fan of this episode, specifically because everybody loves to make the joke ever since Lucas said it of like, oh, film is a visual medium, but it is. And Rodriguez really makes the most of it here. I think another nice thing about the episode, I'd like to get your thoughts, is we are freed from the volume. We are outside. We are straight up outside here. And I know it's the hills of Southern California that they're in, but I wanted to get your reaction. Do you detect any sort of vibe shift by actually being in an all-natural, sunlit environment? Is there anything more dynamic about the photography here for you?
I think the biggest part of this is you can have anyone move anywhere at any time. You know, their acting is free in that sense. Their movement is not restricted. And, you know, and it's done on the volume right, there's nothing that you catch in that. But when it's not done right, you can kind of get this sense of almost the characters being straitjacketed, you know? And so that, of course, does not happen here at all. You know, I would say that the beauty of them being outside is also a detriment to them being outside because, like you said, this just looks like Southern California. And I will say, you know, when we said we were going to go to a, you know, previous Jedi temple on Tython, one of the, you know, the hallmarks of, you know, Star Wars lore, you know, that is something that goes back a long time in the lore, especially with the EU. I personally found myself very underwhelmed by what was created, and I think part of that is, of course, budget-wise, is that they're just restricted. And I had wished that there was just more to this, and I expected more too. Actually, when I heard that we were going to Tython, what are your feelings on the matter?
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I expected a little more as well. I rationalize it from the idea that a planet is large. So it's sort of I would rationalize it by saying it's sort of a Lothal approach where the Jedi Temple was hidden. So all that they saw was that bit with the Seeing Stone and the rest was underground. And I think that is a lot of rationalization that I have to bring to it. But it works for me because of the fact that I'm like, you know, okay, it's hidden like it was on Lothal. They didn't even have any idea that there was a Jedi temple there, and they're there the whole time because it's hidden inside a rock. So I can live with it that way. I mean, do you think I'm working overtime to sort of like excuse it or?
No, I mean, I can absolutely see what you're saying, and it could work for it to have more to it in that sense that, you know, that there is a hidden way to get into the temple and then, you know, you would end up in something amazing, you know, this being kind of something that's supposed to be an ancient Jedi spot. I almost would have expected something like, you know, the Argonath we saw in Ahsoka. You know, just something, you know, or even on Jeddah, right? Like, I think that's the thing is that when I thought of us being on Tython and what I'd seen them do with Jeddah, right? This planet where apparently the Jedi had a huge presence and you saw, you know, massive statues in the sand. I guess I expected something like that. But again, in many ways, you know, this episode is more about, even though we're there for Grogu, this episode really becomes about us filling in a lot of the questions for Boba Fett himself, especially the ones that fans had ever since, you know, it was revealed how he was created in the, you know, pre-Clone Wars. Jango Fett himself, is he a Mandalorian? All the stuff we learned in the Clone Wars about these two. And so what did you think about the way in which, you know, Dave and Filoni worked to kind of bring all of that together? And you know, John is the writer here, you know, to kind of bring all the lore together.
I agree with you. It winds up being a Boba Fett focus. And I think that they do it in the right way, which is Grogu has to go into a trance. So I excuse that. I can allow him to be outside of the main action. I also think it's a great way to frame the action because if Grogu had been there during the battle, it's just another thing of waiting to see how he's going to save Din with his force powers or something like that. And I think the payoff is that I think more than any other time, including on his own show, they really gave Temuera Morrison a chance to just shine in a battle and, like get to make those really fierce warrior faces and use that gaffy stick. And it's like, that's pretty cool, because that in itself raises the further question of like, well, why is he using that? How did he get that? And it's like, obviously we're going to find out in the Boba Fett show, which we didn't know we were getting by this point, I don't think. Did we know we were getting it by this point? I don't think so. I think they kept that hidden.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember.
Because that was the big teaser. That was the big post-credits sting at the end of the season. Anyway, I think it works well. I think that they did a really good job of making it acceptable to focus, but also bring the Empire into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'd say the big debate is, you can easily say, well, is the tragedy that Grogu gets kidnapped, or is the tragedy that the Razor Crest gets destroyed? Because that's two tragedies right there. And which one actually caused more heartache for the fans is a good question. Because what's interesting, especially when you watch it on a compressed rewatch like this, is they destroy the Razor Crest here. And in real time, we've been with the Razor Crest in the real world as a toy set, as a thing that we like for some time. Right. By this point. Yeah. But it story-wise, watching it on a compressed thing where like I know the timelines and everything like that, and I haven't had to take so much time, blah, 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 blah. The Razor Crest doesn't live for very long in this show. And I just want to ask you, like, do you think that them destroying the Razor Crest winds up being any sort of pivotal moment where Disney merchandising brass is like, whoa. Before you do anything, guys, you got to clear that stuff with us from here on out, because we got toy sales to think about.
I think one of the things about this that was really interesting is one, it was a complete shock to have that happen. To have them decide, hey, we're just going to blow up the Razor Crest was huge, right? And, as we're recording this, we know from the Mandalorian and Grogu trailer that he has a new Razor Crest. It's like the YT-1300, Han's Millennium Falcon is not the only one. Now, of course, what he had done to upgrade it, that's a different story. But there are other YT-1300s out there that he could replace the Falcon with and do the same things to, and it would feel very similar. And so, but I think that the beauty of them taking this route is that it let you know that the series was taking itself seriously, in the sense that anything could happen in this show to any of your characters, even the ship you love, right? And like Star Trek, right? Which people fall in love with the different vessels on that show. Star Wars is the same, right? The Millennium Falcon is a beloved ship. The X-Wings are beloved, people just, the Star Destroyers and all of these ships become things that people just gravitate towards. And so by taking this away from the Mandalorian, I think too, it's really putting him in that moment of where a character has everything taken away from them. Everything is stripped away, and now this character has to find a way to rise above. The arc for Din here is one about letting go of a lot of things that he has considered his for a long time. And so in many ways, losing the Razor Crest here is highlighting the big choice that's going to come at the end of the season, right? And so he doesn't have a choice, right? In the same way that he really doesn't have a choice as to whether or not Grogu will choose to go with Luke at the end. And so, I find that really interesting, and it juxtaposes with these characters like Din, and then even like Jango Fett, who we learn were foundlings, right? They're characters who had nothing and somebody found them and raised them, you know? And so there's all of these connections that they're making in this episode to things that are going to happen, things that have happened, and it's all tying together really well. So even though the story for this episode has a ton of action, we actually are moving the story forward in a lot of different ways and connecting to all these things throughout the Star Wars universe with these characters, which I think is one of those things to where the Mandalorian was showing it knew how to tell Star Wars stories, right? And I think the best compliment I could give it is that this is one of those episodes where I think it showed that it had learned a lot about storytelling from the structure of the Clone Wars, and how do you do this in, say, 30 minutes? Because this isn't a long episode either. So we're going to do all of this storytelling, but we're going to do it in 28 to 30 minutes.
And I think that they do something that's low-key brilliant in the fact that the act of destroying the Razor Crest also allows them to really highlight how tough that Beskar spear is. Because we've seen it go against a lightsaber in combat, quick hits. But if it's the one thing that survives the entire ship being destroyed, a straight-up turbo laser blast, you will accept that that thing will do anything from this point forward. It's unstoppable. It's the ultimate hand-to-hand weapon now. So that will come into play in the future too. We don't know how at this point when we're watching it for the first time. But like you said, it's a short episode, so there's not like a lot to get into necessarily. But what I wanted to, I want to actually round it out by like just asking you the straightforward question, two straightforward questions. One, what was your favorite part of the episode? What moment? What scene? And then the second one is, was it sufficient enough to make you excited for the next episode? Like, were you like, I can't wait for next week now? Did it accomplish that job?
I 100% was excited for the next episode. So I'll answer that one first. I think partly because I loved the way in which we end, where, Boba Fett has made this pledge that until, the foundling is found, the child is found, Grogu is found, that he is with Mando. And then the moment that I love at the end too, where he's trying to talk Cara Dune into coming with him, and he's like, they took the kid. And her face is just perfect. Like, let's go. I'm going to F somebody up big time,
yes.
Which is fantastic. But so, yes, I was 100% pumped to see what was going to come next, because it's a small microcosm of them bringing all of these characters together here to the end of this series and the end of this season specifically. But that's kind of what the Mandoverse has slowly been doing as we've been moving through, right? It's continuously bringing in more and more players that are going to become more and more important, which is great. Man, that moment where Boba Fett, does the knee missiles was just pretty freaking sweet, dude. I thought that was just like, that's a moment where Boba Fett is just absolutely flexing,
Yes.
Or as I guess the kids say now, he's maxing. I don't know what that is, but I saw it.
I want to officially say that if you ever say that again, I will end the podcast permanently. Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that to me again.
What about you though? What really stood out to you is the scene where you're just kind of like, oh, that's the scene right there.
We always love to talk about how this show knows and loves how to bring, old EU stuff in. Mm-hmm. And seeing Dark Troopers, this version of Dark Troopers flying down.
Yes. So great.
Yeah. Sorry. Call me a fanboy, call me whatever, but seeing that was amazing. I was so, that was the best for me, was seeing them fly down, remembering playing Dark Forces for the first time in my life decades ago, and just seeing it and being like, it wasn't just a hug for an old fan.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just it was a full-on kiss from an old lover that you never let go of. It's a kiss between between Rick and Ilsa in Casablanca.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, you're back in my life. And oh gosh, you're back in my life. I couldn't be happier. And
absolutely.
so, that I know I'm a big dork. Was I excited for the next week? Yeah. After this, I mean, I thought season 2 has been nothing but bangers by this point. But this was this was an extra shot of adrenaline of like, oh my gosh, the stakes are even higher now.
Agreed.
And, when they kidnapped Grogu, it was like, no. Like, I actually believed he could be hurt in some way. And that's,
well, in that moment,
destroying
right,
the Razor
to end
Crest.
the episode where he's torturing those stormtroopers, and the Darksaber comes out, and all of that is just, I mean, again, if you're not excited for what's coming next, I think that you need to check your pulse because you're probably dead.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. So this is a 5-star episode. Yeah, I think we agree.
Yeah, I think this is this probably because it's not like the best episode of The Mandalorian, but I do think it's way up there just because of what he's able to accomplish. And so I would give this one 4.5 out of 5. Yeah. Like, it's not perfect, but it's pretty perfect, and that's really all that matters. Like, it does everything I need it to do. And so
I'll give it a 5. I'll give it a straight up 5 simply because of the fact that I think it's even more important with a show like this to be like emotionally great. And I think this show is emotionally great. This episode is emotionally great. Like, by the end of it, I'm just confirmed as like a huge fan of the show, and I just can't wait for each episode. So
agreed.
5 from me. So high marks across the board. But you know what else gets high marks from me is your online presence, where else people can find you.
Well, yes.
So where can they find you online?
I'm all over social media under the name MattRushing02. So if I'm on that platform, just search for that name and you'll find me. You can also find me here on the network with a show called Owl Post, where I'm talking about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. You can also find me over on the TFM network. I got a bunch of shows over there. One is called the 602 Club. John's a frequent guest over there. We talk about all of the franchises we love outside of Star Trek. I was just thinking, John, 5 years since Zack Snyder's Justice League came out. So that's one of the big things we talked about in a whole show called Snyder Cuts. You can find there as well. So you can also find me with a lot of great Star Trek talk with my good friend Chris Jones. But John, when you're not trying to figure out how to get back to the Seeing Stone, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me online as Kessel Junkie, and like Matt said, if I'm somewhere, that's how you would summon me. It's like an incantation by this point. And shout it out to the sky. Walk outside right now and just shout Kessel Junkie to the sky, and maybe I'll show up. But you might want to just go to Goodreads or Letterboxd because that's where I have the most fun. And you can find me here on the network co-hosting a show with Tristan Riddell and Darren Moser called House Lights, where we have a delightful time talking about different movies and everything like that. But otherwise, pulling the occasional guest gig over on 602 Club, like Matt said, where, it's the great godfather of this show. So, origin points for everything. So always fun, always a good time. But Matt, I'll tell you what, I am going to go back to the temple now and start trying to find little pieces of Razor Crest to reconstruct it so it's all rebuilt in time for the Mandalorian and Grogu, and have a nice in-canon story for it. So I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.